Predators don't go after prey they think is going to win against them. They go after somebody they perceive as weaker. Statistics on violence against women show us that most women know who their attacker is. Your sense of taste. Have you ever drank spoiled milk? You have it in your mouth, your taste buds are like, something's wrong. It's spitting it out almost naturally, so quick. That's your intuition. It's the same thing. It's a basic survival skill. The amount of stories that are out there about women being attacked while out for a run or out for a walk are unfortunately too regular. So that is a real concern comes up. How do I tell if I'm being followed? What can I do? I'm trying to make the information relatable. You know, I had one young lady ask me, she's like, well, my dad doesn't want me to carry anything because he's worried it's going to be used against me. Should I call someone and have them on the phone with me while I'm walking? It's not saying, no, that's a bad idea. It's like, okay, well, let's talk through this. So what is that person supposed to do if you get attacked?
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. She has spent 7 years total experience thus far in what I would call the Women's Situational Awareness and Safety Department, which we're going to get into quite heavy. She's the founder and president of the Diamond Arrow Group, which empowers women to really live on their own terms through situational awareness and safety. She's the author of Sharp Women, which to me, I'm going to be honest, is a little redundant because let's face it, they all kind of are, right? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Kelly Sayre. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did. Thanks for having me.
You know how many times I've done that and said, have I pronounced your name right on air when I should have just fucking asked before we started? I've done that like 30 times in the course of this show. How you doing?
Good.
Thanks for coming down. I know we've been working on coordinating a date for you to come do this for a while, and unfortunately it's no better weather here than where you're from, I don't think, but I appreciate you taking the time to come down. I know we do have a fairly robust female listener demographic that I think with a lot of the other guests that we've had on the show, a topic like this is A, really important, and B, of interest because it's a big part of our society, and for somebody like me, a father of 2 daughters, it's very important to me to go over this kind of stuff and have somebody with your level of subject matter expertise to talk to and kind of go through this book, which I'm really, really looking forward to. What is a woman?
Oh, man, you're going to start with that?
Yep.
I think I would say that I'm like, geez, Mike, I was hoping for what's your morning routine shit?
Oh, you'll get that. I'm throwing you a shitty curveball. You don't have to answer that. What's the last book that you read?
Blink by Malcolm Gladwell.
Tell me about it.
It's basically talking about heuristics, but in a civilian way. He calls it thin slicing. So how we see things and immediately interpret the information, make it relate to us, but it's so fast. And he's breaking down that process in his book. It's fascinating. I love that stuff.
Does it talk at all about preconceived notions or biases that we have and how that would impact a quick assessment of something incorrectly, perhaps?
Yeah, the slippery slope of sometimes as we get to be more expert at something, then we judge because, oh, well, I've seen this before, so this is XYZ, this is what's going to happen, this is a scenario. Instead of taking the time and realizing, okay, I see this all the time, I've been in this field, let's say law enforcement for 20 years, so when I see this crime scene, this is exactly what I think happened. And so the slow down and realize like, okay, still go through the process, still think about that. It's a blessing and a curse. You got to be aware of it. Being aware of it is most important.
So in maybe in summary, like don't let your expertise bias your opinion or make you get complacent.
Yeah, complacent I think is a good one.
What is your favorite childhood memory?
Camping for me in northern Minnesota.
Boundary Waters?
Not that far. Cass Lake, Pike Bay, people from there would know that. But we had electric hookup, but you had to go pump water. And it was a beautiful, clear water, the lake. And so we would wake up, we're in a little pickup camper that only slept 4, and there was 5 in my family. So my brother and I would switch off sleeping in the pickup cab, like crawling through the window and sleeping in the cab, which I hated. That's because awesome. You'd see the the branches moving, you wake up in the middle of the night, and it felt like you were sleeping outside. But yeah, we would just be in the water all day.
Is that in the Bemidji area by chance?
North of that.
North of that, so way up there. Not Boundary Waters, but north of Bemidji. I've spent a fair bit of time up there. It's one of those things, looking back on it, and me as a dad now with kids that are that age, that, you know, when I did that, like, I can't believe my parents let me drive with a buddy of mine from northern Iowa all the way up to the fucking Boundary Waters and hike for a week by ourselves when we were like 16. There's no fucking way I'd let my kids do that. I mean, part of it is that they're girls, but fuck the way the world is. Like, I just wouldn't be that comfortable with it. And we didn't have cell phones. You know, there's no GPSs. Like, we were up there with fucking nothing, you know, for like a week. It was crazy. It was awesome. But
right.
I'm going to take a quick break. I do want to let you guys know the way that you can support the show is to support our sponsors. I know some people don't like to hear ads, but that's how I do what I do for a living. So any support you can show for our gracious sponsors is much appreciated. And again, it does support the show. So thank you.
What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero.
What is your morning routine?
Pretty typical. Wake up around 5:50, 6 o'clock.
Cold plunge?
Yeah, no, it's
You
cold
live in
naturally,
Minnesota.
right?
Step outside.
Yeah. And I have two boys, 9 and 11 right now. And so my husband usually goes downstairs, makes the coffee. I get the kids up, and then we kind of switch. And then I go down and make breakfast for the kids myself.
Not him.
No.
You don't make him breakfast?
No.
He doesn't eat breakfast?
No, he usually doesn't. It's like a piece of toast.
I got you.
And then I work out in the mornings twice a week, and then we kind of flip flop depending on or meetings or schedule, whatever. So it's always the night before, like, can you get the kids to the bus? Because our bus stop isn't actually at our house, so we have to drive a few miles away.
Yeah.
And so we switch off that role. And then I usually, as soon as I'm done working out, or if I'm not working out, I go straight to my office once the kids are gone.
Yeah.
And then it's work until 5, 6 o'clock.
So with him being a higher up within a fairly big police department, does his schedule change a lot, or is he kind of past the, you know, working fucking vampire shift and all that? Like, is it more predictable now that, so it's,
yep. His shift or his schedule is really predictable, and he's also on call with some of the teams that he manages, runs, or is on.
I got you. All right. So growing up, you're from Minnesota?
Yeah.
Where exactly?
Rockville. I'm going to say Rockville. It's a town of 500 people.
Where is that in relation to Minneapolis?
60 miles northwest, up 94. St. Cloud is the big city that is by us.
So, like, growing up, going into town, you'd go into Minneapolis to go shopping and all that?
Nope, going to St. Cloud.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So Minneapolis was like a once-a-year thing.
Right. Yeah. And actually, my mom refuses to drive in the city, so we never went there. And my dad is a truck driver, and he also refused to go there. So that wasn't until I was old enough to drive.
Yeah. How big of a town is St. Cloud?
The town itself, I would say, is 75,000, but then there's 4 other cities around it, 5. So all together, the cluster, I would say, is like 150.
Yeah. And how far is that from where you grew up?
10 miles.
10 miles. Growing up in Minnesota and it being Viking country football-wise, but also just, I mean, almost culturally, like the weather is, you know, pretty Northern European like. How would you encompass growing up there, and did you have siblings, and just what was that experience like?
Yeah, I have 2 siblings, a younger brother and a younger sister, and we grew up there. You played outside. I'm old enough to have been born before a lot of the electronics. My parents were very much like, you're not getting a video game console. We don't have a computer. So it was very much kind of on your own. We were latchkey kids.
Yeah. How many of you?
3 of us. And we were pretty close in age. Brother's 3 years younger, sister's 5 years younger. And so I was kind of always the one in charge. So, but we very much were like, well, what can we do outside? Building forts and climbing trees. And there was a little cornfield. Rockville's so small. We're in town, but across the street is a cornfield, one of those type of things. And there was a hill. So in the winter we'd go sledding, and Mom would call us in by flicking the front porch lights. And that's when we knew it was time to come in.
Yeah.
So we were outside all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being in a town that small and kind of what you do for a living now, was there a huge disparity, or was there like a kind of a naivete growing up where nothing bad happened and like you were pretty oblivious to the evils of the world that really exist? Or were there any examples of shit like that happened growing up that kind of woke you up that way?
I think there was a certain naive feeling or outlook. I mean, technically I was born down in Marshall, Minnesota, and we moved up when I was little. But I was in 2nd grade. So what is that, 7 years old, 8 years old? And even though it's our small town, there was a major highway that went through. And I had, because we were too close to school, probably 5-6 blocks, I had to walk. So at 7, 8 years old, little girl walking alongside this major highway, and then to get to elementary school every day. So I think about that, and you talk about your daughters. I'm like, I would never, like now I'd be like, no way, I'm walking you to school every day. Yeah. But we couldn't. That wasn't an option. And then once my brother was in school and stuff, then it was, okay, there's 2 of us walking, that's different. But where I lived, I don't know if you've ever heard of Jacob Wetterling. Jacob Wetterling was 11, and he was kidnapped from the next town over. And they started the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, and he just went missing. And basically what happened is him, a friend, and a brother went biking to the gas station to get a video, to rent a video. And on their way back were stopped by an individual with a gun. And he told the other 2 to run, and he took Jacob. And nobody ever knew what happened to him. And we had Jacob's Hope, and we had all of these things. And I was probably 9 or 10 when he was abducted. I think I was that old. And so that was really impactful because I was right there.
Yeah. Did they ever find him?
A few years ago. They finally, the individual through, he was arrested for child pornography, older guy, and through, bargaining, whatever, he confessed and told them where the body was, and then they went and dug up the body. It was like 30 years later.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so that was very much front of mind then when I was that age, but yet ironically, I had a paper out in 4th grade and would bike all over our little town delivering
at 5
papers.
in the morning.
No, it wasn't the big paper. It was like the shopping news once a week, so I could go after school.
Yeah.
But
so growing up, I guess in that environment, did you play any sports?
Yes, I played volleyball.
And B, like what did you want to do when you grew up? Like what was kind of your career path or desire professionally as you were growing up there?
I really wanted to be a veterinarian.
Really?
Yep. That was, my grandma had bought me The Best of James Herriot. He was like an Irish vet that wrote all these books. And so I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Want to work with animals. And our second family dog, Rusty, he was, the old outdoor on a chain run with the doghouse inside the back garage. And an unfortunate incident, we weren't home, neighbor kid came over, played in our sandbox, Rusty could reach it, bit him, and so they, sued us, we had to put the dog down. And when we did that, I was like, I could never put down a healthy dog. Yeah. Nope, I can't be a vet. Yeah. Wow. And so I changed my mind, and then after that, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. But I knew, growing up in that small town, I was very much, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah.
I have to get out of here. I got to see, there's so much else out there. I was the oldest. I was just very, my mom used to joke that I was the milkman and the mail lady's daughter because I was so different than my perspective of the world was so different than hers. And being that my dad was gone most of the time being a truck driver, her and I just butted heads. Yeah. And not in a abnormal teenage way, but in a very much, we're just two different people.
Yeah.
Like for her to drive in the Twin Cities, or, I mean, the first time she was on an airplane is when she was in her 50s and came to visit me in California.
Wow.
So we just had a very different, I was like, I want to meet everyone and go everywhere. And she was like, I'm never leaving.
Yeah. So how did that progress, like through high school and once you graduated, like what was at the forefront and what kind of drove you into the different career paths or aspects of your life prior to what you do now?
I was very much a planner type A person in high school. Like I sat down my freshman year of high school, figured out what classes I had to take for the next 4 years in order to have study labs, like as many slough off class my senior year as possible. And so I was very much like, here's the plan. This is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. I was working, I think my first official job was housekeeping in a Holiday Inn.
Really?
That was very
In high school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went to the cafe and did busing tables, in which you actually got to do room service, so you got better tips anyway. But I was like, I like hospitality. I like hotels. This is really cool. You can travel. You can get a job anywhere, and you can go to all these exotic places and do all these things. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go for hotel management. I'm going to go to this college. Like I applied my junior year, got accepted, all these things. And neither of my parents were anti-college or for college, really. They were kind of like, well, if you want to do that, good luck. Yeah, figure it out. Which led to a friend of mine grabbing me one day and saying, hey, I'm joining the National Guard. You should join it too. And I was like, that's a good point. That'll help me pay for college. And I've always kind of my dad was a big World War II buff. I grew up watching a lot of those movies and documentaries and Tour of Duty and China Beach and MASH, all those shows. So to me, like I even went to Ragstock and had like all the PT t-shirts, like Marines, Army, Navy, whatever. And I would wear those. And I was very much a tomboy in high school. I wore the, Levi's jeans, the No Fear t-shirts and the flannel, over.
Like a 90s grunge chick?
Kind of, but not quite grunge.
Yeah.
But it was just very like, oh, that sounds cool. It wasn't so abnormal or so out of the realm of possibility. And so that was going to be my ticket out.
Yeah.
And so I joined went through everything, had to have my parents sign off because I'm a summer baby. So I was 17 when I graduated high school. And I went to boot camp the summer after my senior year. But because I had been so proactive and signed up for college and was already accepted, they said, we'll give you the split option. So, which they typically give high school juniors that join so that you can come back and go your senior year of high school. So they were like, yep, you'll just go to boot camp this summer, drill with the unit, and then come back and do AIT the following summer. And I was like, great, sounds good. And that was my first time on an airplane, going to boot camp. And that to me was such a pivotal moment. I know it's not possible, but I think everybody should go through boot camp. And now it's different. I don't even know what the standards are. Again, this was a few years ago.
Yeah.
But that to me was the perfect passageway, because there I learned that no matter how exhausted I was mentally or physically, there was always a little bit more in the gas tank. And they didn't care who you were. They didn't care what your background was. They didn't care who where you came from, whatever. They were like, this is what you have to do and do it, period. Like there's no whining, there's no excuses. And so that to me was, I say, one of the best life experiences for me. Yeah. But then I graduated on a Friday and started college on a Monday.
Wow.
So I went
That's
right
culture
from
shock.
Exactly. Like I showed up and I had met my dorm roommate at placement testing. And so she was there. So I missed all of freshman orientation. I missed all of that stuff. So she's there and they're like, well, where's your roommate? Oh, she's at boot camp. So they're all expecting this huge butch, like, whatever chick to come, wants to beat everybody up. And then I show up and they're like, oh, but I also had zero patience or tolerance for,
Leaving shit laying around.
That, or people with like the professor would come in. It's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Or be quiet or like fall, whatever. So that was definitely a culture shock. But
where did you go to school?
It was University of Wisconsin Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin.
Which
my mom was like, you're so far away. And I'm like, Mom, 2 hours.
Yeah.
She's like, but I'd have to drive by the cities.
I'm going to have to go across state lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So, all right, so you went through boot camp, started college, and then did you do AIT that following summer?
So that's part of the interesting story that I usually don't talk about going to boot camp because people are like, well, you were in the military? You weren't. So because of the National Guard, you have to drill once a weekend.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a car my freshman year of college. So I couldn't get back and forth to drill. And they're like, well, you just drill with the unit there in Menominee. Well, it was an infantry unit. So as a female, I couldn't. So they had me doing like paperwork to make up hours at nights. Like I would come in and type up all kinds of fun, not fun paperwork. And so I really lost touch with like the mission, let's say. Well, when I went back to MEPS, then to go through the physical before going to AIT, they were like, so, your knees are awful. And from playing volleyball, running, just being outdoors, I had bad knees the way it was. And so they kicked me back to my unit in St. Cloud and said, and I'll never forget that conversation of like, you can either sign a waiver that if anything happens to your knees at AIT, like we're not responsible, or we'll just give you a general discharge. And at the time and the influential people in my life, I had a boyfriend. My mom was like, when I signed up for the military, she again was like, oh my God, my baby's going to go to war. And this is peacetime.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, no, Mom, I'm trying to figure out how to pay for college. And it's kind of cool. But so I was like, well, I'm 18. I don't have insurance. I don't have a job. If I screw up my knees for the rest of my life. And, the people, like I said, the influential people around me were like, just get out. You'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. And so I took the general discharge. So really, I'm like, I got to go to basically an adult summer camp that kicked my ass.
Yeah. But you learned a lot, though.
Oh, my God. It was amazing. Yeah. It was such an experience.
Looking back on it now, do you have any regrets for taking that route? Or is it one of those, I'm happy where I'm at and I wouldn't be here, if I had done that, who knows where I would be? Like, how do you reflect on that?
I would have to say if that is like the one regret that I'll own up to in my life type thing is not staying in it. And I also wouldn't be where I am today had I made a different decision. Who knows?
Yeah.
Not saying it would be worse, or better, but it would just be different.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a question I get asked a lot. Like, hey, if you hadn't joined the military, what would you be doing? I'm like, dude, flip a fucking coin. I have no idea. Like, I really have no fucking clue what I'd be doing if I hadn't joined. And I don't even really like thinking about it. My life would be so vastly different. I can't even really wrap my mind around it. But all right, so you take the general discharge, and then did you stay in college?
No, because then I was like, well, how am I going to pay for college now? And doing the hospitality, granted, the first year is not really, you're not getting into those college, that like 400 level classes. But I just did the whole, okay, I don't know what I want to do with my life. This is because I was such a planner, because I had all organized out. This is a curveball that I didn't see coming. Surprise, life doesn't happen the way you plan it. And so I was like, okay, I kind of need to get my bearings. Transferred back to the local tech college in St. Cloud and was like, I'm going to do sales and management. I'll get a 2-year degree. And then when I grow up, I'll figure out what I want to do. And so did that and got done. Well, in that boyfriend had proposed. We were engaged. And I kind of get into it in the book, talking about the behaviors at the time that were more controlling that I didn't realize at the time were controlling. But so I'm back home. I'm around all my old friends. I'm around the boyfriend now more. But I was like, well, I'm going to live with my 3 girlfriends in this place. And I'm going to go to school with all these kids that are my age. And I'm there all the time and around them.
Was he older?
Yeah, like 3 years. But I would say that old soul type thing. He wanted to settle down, have babies. I'll be a stay-at-home mom, like all this kind of stuff. And I was like, no, that's not me. It's just, that's not me. And so going to school back in my hometown where I knew more people didn't feel, like, okay, I'm going to go out and hang out with these people. Whereas when you're in the college, state away, you're not showing up. And because I'd gone to boot camp after my senior year, I didn't go out to the senior parties, and I didn't really say goodbye. Yeah. It's like I left, we graduated, and I was gone that summer, and then I went to school in another state. And then I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready to get married. What the hell am I thinking? I'm so young, blah, blah, blah. Broke off the engagement. And then it was like this whole, what are you doing? You're messing up your life. Like, you're done with college now. You've got that 2-year degree, which both my parents had. So they were like, you're good. Sales management, you can get a job doing anything. You're here, you have he had a house. It was kind of like the white picket fence, 2 kids and a dog. Like, you'll have it all. What are you doing throwing it all away because you just don't feel right? And through all of that, there was a lot of pressures. And at that time, I look back and I want, you talk about regrets, try not to give myself too much grief for that time period, putting myself back there. But it got to be where I'm like, yeah, maybe I am making a mistake. Maybe I am asking for too much or thinking, because I grew up in the small town. This is whatever everyone's telling me. This is perfect. This is sweet, because my dad, being an overload truck driver, was gone Monday through Friday. And I didn't think that was unusual. I was like, well, that's just normal. That's what, when kids would say, I only see my dad on the weekends, and be like, me too, not knowing there was a different context there. Yeah. So for my mom, she was like, you have someone who's going to be home every night. He's home every weekend. He's got a good job. He can provide, blah, all these things. And so I was like, yeah, maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And so we ended up getting back together and got married. And a month after we got married, we were camping with my sibling, with my brother and his girlfriend at the time. And we got in this huge fight. And he's like, well, I didn't really love you. I only married you so you'd never leave. And I was like, because I'd been raised Catholic, and you don't get divorced. That is the worst thing ever, And we had just been married, and I just remember being crushed. Like, what am I, a bird? What am I, a caged bird? And that impacted me, and did the whole thing and tried to go to couples counseling, and it was very much a smug response, is I guess the way I would describe it, is, what are you going to do? You're not going to leave. You're kind of stuck with me now, which only pissed me off more. Mm-hmm. And that's where I kind of said, even the counselor was like, okay, you two, we're going in circles. You're either going to commit to staying together and figuring it out, or you're going to get divorced. And it was kind of like, he sat back. He's like, I'm not getting divorced. And I was like, fuck you, I am. And I walked out, and that was nuclear fallout. Dramatic, I know. It's not nuclear fallout, but it felt that way at the time, because it was, oh my God, you just got married. You'd already broken up the engagement, got back together. Now you got married. Now you got divorced. It was awful. And to the point, because of all the friends were like, oh, well, sorry. Like, we can't invite both of you to go out. And, my boyfriend's friends with him. So, and that really then was like, okay, I've been through boot camp. I can do anything, go anywhere, figure this out on my own. I don't need much. And that was where my college dorm roommate was done at Stout. She had stayed there, and we were best friends. And I was like, let's move to California. And that's where I kind of look at life as like chapters. So that was close of one chapter, open of the next.
So you go to California, and where and what did you do?
So we went to Irvine, Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach area. She had gotten a job in a hotel there, and I was kind of like, I don't care. I'll figure it out. And she had a couple friend that lived there and had a 2-bedroom apartment, so we could take over the second bedroom till we figured out what we were doing. And that was just another great experience, because it was her and I. Nobody was judging me, knew my backstory. It was almost like a fresh start. And I could really figure out who I was. I know a lot of people say, oh, people in California are fake. And I'm like, well, they are, or they just don't give a shit what you think, and they're just kind of like, you're not my type, whatever, or like, we don't have interests. So I could be whoever I was because there's a million people, and you could find commonalities with whoever.
Yeah.
So I really loved it. I loved the weather.
Yeah. This is like 2000?
2003.
Okay. I would like to take a real quick break and talk to you about MyBookie. I want you to go to mybookie.com and use my promo code MicDrop, which you'll instantly get a deposit bonus up to $1,000. Remember to use my code MicDrop and bet with me only at MyBookie. Primarily, the only way watching these fights could get any better is to get paid doing it, and MyBookie makes that a possibility. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Did 9/11 have any impact on you? Like, or where were you? Were you in college when that happened?
No, I was I in college? I might have been still in college. I remember where I was. I was at work, and ironically, we were like woodcraft, cabinet making, supplies, knobs, pulls, sliders, and I was the sales assistant there. And my computer was the only one that had internet.
So this was after your general discharge?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I'd gotten out in 99.
Okay.
But I remember like all the phones went dead. Like we were an incoming call center, customers calling us, and none of the phones were ringing. And everyone's listening to radios because we had no TVs. People didn't have their cell phone, you know, and my computer was the only one with internet. So I'm constantly hitting like refresh, like, what the hell? And ironically, for whatever reason, my dad was home that day. And it was kind of this surreal because you're listening, and we're not used to that. You know how people used to sit around and listen to the radio and hear stories. So you're imagining, your mind is creating the picture more than actually seeing the images. And I remember calling my dad, ironically, he was home that morning for whatever reason, and being on the phone with him, he was watching TV, and he's like, oh my God, the tower's falling. And so again, you can only imagine, you can't see this image. And I just was like, what the hell is happening? And then there was the whole, I wish I wouldn't have gotten out, but I can't go back and change that now. But kind of the whole, you only have one life to live. You just never know what's going on. And really brought that perspective of like, I don't care what people think. I don't care what people think of me. This is a really big deal. And this is really, I just knew was going to change the trajectory. But more than what I could grasp at that moment.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. I mean, I know it's an interesting question to ask pretty much every guest I have, and there's such a wide variety of answers. But to me, I'm always curious what impact that had because it was such a pivotal moment in our nation's history. But all right, so you're in California, you're kind of figuring your shit out. Between then and going back to Minnesota, that's what a 10-year period?
No, not even.
Not
like
even?
3.
So you're 3 years in California. What was the process back and ultimately into, I guess, from 2003 to 2017 when you got into this? What was the span of that like?
Oh, geez.
Or how would you categorize it?
Right. So out in California, like I said, it was, I say that I found my inner spark again and was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. This is who I am. And just gained a lot of self-confidence because it was my girlfriend and I out there. We didn't have family. We only could create the relationships or create our circle, our tribe from scratch. So who do you trust? And, when the car breaks down, who are you calling? Or different things like that. And because we're 2 single females, there was a lot of discussions that we had on, well, if we're getting robbed or if our apartment's getting broken into, or if we're out for a walk, the thing was she was going to run and I was going to try and tackle them because growing up with my brother, him and I grappled all the time growing up. We beat the crap out of each other. And she just didn't have that growing up, didn't have that mentality. So I'm like, well, one of us has got to be a witness, And, looking back now, I'm like, why did I volunteer as tribute? Yeah. What?
Did you guys have any close calls in the few years you're out there?
Mm-mm.
Nothing?
Yeah, knock on wood. But we did, if we're out and it's just the 2 of us, what's our safety word?
Yeah.
How are we going to, if somebody's bothering us, what's going to be our word to get the other person's attention that we're like, oh, you don't want to be talking to that person. I need to interrupt you and, pull you away. So we had conversations like that. But, I met someone out there, got set up on a blind date. He had family in Iowa, ironically.
Look out.
Yeah. And
which means you automatically can't trust him.
And that was right when my brother's starting his family, my sister's starting her family. And there was very much that pull of, I don't want to be the aunt in California that they don't know. And I mean, the cost of living, it was great while I was young, single, had no responsibilities, could work 80 hours a week to pay the rent and get groceries, So it was like, I think it's time. And he proposed, we moved back to Minnesota. There was some family issues on his side with, they had said, his dad had said, well, I'll help with the down payment of the house. Well, this was 2008. So right at the housing market, right before the crash hit the Midwest. Yeah. And so houses were at premium. It's like, okay, well, we don't have jobs lined up back home. I don't have a huge savings account after living in Southern California. So his dad had said, and then we signed papers on a house and, whatever happened. But his dad was like, nope, I'm not going to help you with the down payment. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I signed a contract. I can't back out on this. I paid the $1,000 earnest money. What? And so it was like, whatever. I've done it before. We'll figure it out. And so we moved back. It was like the coldest day of winter. It was February. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. Wait, I want to change my mind. I don't want to come back right now. This is ridiculous. And that's what kind of brought me back to Minnesota.
So did you end up staying? Is this your current husband?
No.
Did you guys end up getting married?
Yes.
Yeah. So strike two.
Yeah.
Strike two.
Yeah, strike two.
So from there until your current relationship, what was the timeline or the path that way?
Yeah. So my second husband had grown up with like a silver spoon. And so
this is the Iowa guy.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had that in Iowa.
Well, he had some family in Iowa, but he had grown up outside of Detroit and then St. Louis.
I got you.
And his dad lived in California. And so to him, I mean, like we were donating plasma to get groceries. We were paying the bills, but it was very much like, hey, let's keep the house at 62 degrees because we need to keep the energy bills low.
Yeah.
And that was a new experience. I'll categorize it. And my perspective of he didn't handle that well. And so it was very much, I gotta get out of here, or how do I cope? And he didn't choose the best coping mechanisms. And we didn't have kids, and it was very much like, okay, listen, this is the time. Like, shit or get off the pot. Like, either we're all in or we're not, because I'm not going to have kids with someone who is seeming to act like a big kid. And great guy, don't get me wrong. But it was very much like, it's just easier. So he left and moved down to St. Louis at first. And there I was, back near where I grew up pretty much, and going through a second divorce, which was, I thought the first time was bad. The second time wasn't even any better. But again, I look back at those times and I'm like, I wouldn't change that. It made me who I am today. It made me stronger. It made me appreciate, maybe empathize with women who are struggling with things, or they're, it's not so easy as like, well, I'll just get divorced or I'll just leave. There's so many other factors. But in that time then was very much like, I hate men. Sorry, hate him. Like, don't trust, zero trust, whatever. And that it was winter, I remember, and it was me and my dog.
What kind of dog was it?
A pit bull that I had adopted from California before I left. I had volunteered.
Yeah.
This is always so funny, but I had volunteered at the Humane Societies at college when I lived in California because I couldn't have a dog, but this way I could see him.
Yeah.
And so I had volunteered at the the Huntington Beach Humane Society off Newland for anybody who's listening out there. And they had a lot of pit bulls. And that was my first interaction with them. And I thought they were just hilarious. Such personalities, so funny. And so when I knew I was moving back, I was like, finally, I get to pick one to take with me.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so you take him. So it's you and your dog. You're in Iowa or Minnesota?
I'm in Minnesota.
Okay.
Back home. I'm 10 miles from where I grew up.
Okay. What are you doing career-wise at that point?
Working in a restaurant as an assistant manager, and then went to work, an event center, kind of one of those, again, where I don't care. I need a job. I don't have kids. I can work as many hours as you want, whatever. And then got introduced to, or somebody called and said, hey, the Convention and Visitors Bureau has a sports tourism director job open, and you'd be perfect for it. And I'm like, what the heck is sports tourism? They're like, you'll just
figure it out.
It's fine. Just go interview. And I did, got the job, and that was awesome. Basically, I represented our area, our community, our facilities, our hotels to events rights holders or amateur sporting events. So think of kids hockey and basketball and baseball, any sport. And so
try to get them to come to
St. Cloud, because with youth sports, you usually get grandpa and grandma and aunts and uncles, and they're staying in the hotels, they're eating in your restaurant, so it's an economic impact. Yeah. And it was so much fun. I did that job for 8 years, and it was a blast. You played hard, you worked hard, and you partied hard. So.
Yeah. What? How did that come to a conclusion? Entering into kind of your discovery of the situational awareness, women's safety type of line of work. What was the transition from, and why?
Right. So, parallel to that same time doing the sports tourism is how I met my husband. Now husband. Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
I told him, like, you're dying before I leave. We're going to always fight this out tooth or nail. So I definitely found a gentleman who will fight tooth or nail with me. But in a good way, folks, not in a bad way. And so he and I met, and I'm doing the job, and it was very much like, life is good. This is great. We started, we got married, we started our family, had kids, and then it was very much, I'm a very driven person, and I like to be challenged. And in that community, you only have so many hotel rooms. You have only so many facilities. You can only host so many events. And I had gotten to work on some really big, awesome events. And so it was very much like, what's next? Like, I was already the director. Yeah. And there was no other upward unless we moved to a larger city. And him being law enforcement, you don't just jump around. He had joined that department when he got out of college and stayed in it. Mm-hmm. So I'll be in it till I retire. So I'd always, in high school, my senior year, I'd taken an entrepreneurship class, and I was like, I always want to have my own business someday, but I don't know what. And in events, which I kind of kept going back to, or hospitality or restaurants, it's a lot of nights and weekends, and that's not very conducive to family and being married to someone whose job is very, sorry, gotta go, gotta call, gotta go. You can't commit to being gone when you have little kids, because he's literally going to probably save someone's life or whatever, prevent further violence. So you kind of always have to have a little bit of a give and take. And so I had joined this executive peer group for women, and the owner was a solopreneur. And through the coaching, she's like, oh, you want to be an entrepreneur? Well, I don't want my company to end. When I retire, I want it to be my legacy. So what do you think about helping me? And it was helping women, building their confidence through events and coaching, and like networking groups or executive confidential groups. And so I did. And in that is where I kind of learned and really got a passion for helping other women. And hearing them talk about what was holding them back. These are powerful women on the outside. Everyone's like, wow, they're leading, they're the director, they're the vice president, the president, whatever. And behind closed doors, they still have concerns. They still have fears. They still have things that they deal with that you're like, really? oh, I thought that was just me, or I thought you carry yourself so well that I never would have imagined that was the behind the story. And that fell apart. The owner, some unethical business practices, and I discovered them, called it out. I got fired. And then I was kind of like, well, son of a biscuit. And my mentor at the time, who I had met on an airplane, had sat next to him, was like, hey, I know, back up a little bit. So I had taken my first women's self-defense class the fall of 2016 while I was still working for this woman's company. And it was awesome. I loved it. Like, I'd always grown up grappling my brother. I'd gone through boot camp. I was always a physical person. I enjoyed working out. But I was like, if I ever got hit or if I ever got in a fight, that's a whole nother ballgame. Yeah. It's different. And I don't know how I would react. I've never put myself mentally there even. And a woman I knew was hosting this class and co-training or co-teaching with a male. And it was awesome. We spent the 4 hours hitting, kicking, punching, screaming, all the things, get back, all these. And I was like, this is awesome. At the very end of class, the male instructor said, hey, but, let's get real, ladies. Predators don't go after prey they think is going to win against them. They go after somebody they perceive as weaker. And the statistics on violence against women show us that most women know who their attacker is. So it's a whole nother psychological dynamic.
Is there, if you know from a statistical standpoint, that person that they know, is there a category or a top 3 categories that the person that they know fall into? Is it they're in a relationship with, they work with, or like, is there more detailed data on that?
They do break it down, but it's subjective. Like, what do you consider an acquaintance? What do you consider, a coworker, so you can get kind of into the weeds, but it's known to where it's not that stranger danger.
Yeah.
So the instructor is saying that to us, like, hey, so I'm going to give you some real talk. So the last thing you want to do is get into a physical fight, ladies. The last thing you want to do is get into a physical self-defense situation. Like, if you are, okay, fight tooth and nail. But do everything in your power to avoid that. You need to be more situationally aware. And then he was like, see ya. And my brain was like, wait. We just spent the entire class focused on the skills I'm supposed to avoid using, if at all possible. And the thing I'm supposed to use all the time, we didn't talk about it at all.
Seems like a shitty way to wrap that.
Well, and I'm sure it's not intentional. Like, I feel every time I tell this story, I'm always like, the 2 instructors, I'm like, you guys did a great job, yeah. But and I'm glad for it that it happened the way it did, because that to me was running into a brick wall and going, wait a minute, what the heck is situational awareness? What are you talking about? Being married to law enforcement, it was nice. I could go back. I'm like, what is that? And then we could have these really good discussions. But my husband's perspective was, I'm going into a dangerous situation already, or I'm walking towards the situation, or I'm running towards the sound of gunfire. Whereas I'm like, I'm getting the hell out. Like, no, I don't want to. And the threats look different for males and females. What are some of those early micro threats? He's a cop. Like, he's looking and listening at everything and viewing people differently. And talking about being, he's been in law enforcement 27 years now. So he's got a lot of that expert, like, quick.
And he was in the military before that?
Yep. And he had the 20 years in the military before that. So, or I guess at the same time, some of it. And so he's got a very different mindset. But it was fascinating to have those conversations. But what happened is then I said, well, I got to go get situational awareness training because I got to understand this. And what I could find situational awareness talked about a little bit, but it was always in the executive protection industry or the military or law enforcement, like the combat hunter program in the Marines. And I could find those individuals to talk and reach out to them. I'm not shy. So I'd send them an email or a LinkedIn message like, hi, I have a question. Here's my questions. Can I take 30 minutes of your time? I'd appreciate it. Most of the time they're like, yeah. And most of them were male. and years of experience, law enforcement, FBI, military, whatever it would be, but they all had wives or daughters or mothers or sisters. And so I'd say, well, what about this? What does this mean? Okay, well, all your acronyms don't necessarily make sense to me. So how do I relate that to my day-to-day? Or, okay, do X, Y, Z. And I'd be like, that's awesome. But I have a 4 and 5-year-old who don't listen, are like herding cats. So how do I do it then? And they'd be like, I guess I never thought of that, because they hadn't from their mindset. And so the more I dug, the more I came up with no answers, or the comment of, there really isn't training out there for civilians, but specifically females, civilians or citizens, average everyday person. And so I was like, well, I don't know if this is a thing, but if I thought it was interesting, there must be. Maybe other people would be interested. And that's how it organically started is, okay, well, social media, I can put that out for free. It's pretty easy to set up an account. But I had so many nerves because I'm like, I don't have a martial arts background, don't have a law enforcement background, spent one summer at, adult summer camp getting my butt kicked. But, so what are my credentials? There's not a degree for this. I don't have an executive protection background, but I questioned and I was curious and I wasn't afraid to say, I don't know. I don't get that. What does that mean? And then when they would tell me, I was like, well, God, this sounds like a lot of what we were studying from a business perspective or a corporate perspective on carrying yourself with confidence, how to walk into a room, how first impressions matter when you meet people, all these sorts of things. And I'm like, well, that's the same thing that they're saying over here with walking with intention when you're going down the street will also deter predators because they're looking for people who don't look like they know where they're going or they don't look confident, whatever it may be. And so I was kind of like, well, hey, they're saying the same things, but just saying it a different way. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I'll translate. I'll be the decoder. I'll be, I'll bring this up in a way that then maybe other women can relate to and go, oh, that makes sense to me. I got it. And the more I dug into it, the more those similarities I found is I'm like, it's not, when you get down to those principal skills, those foundational skills, it's not something crazy. It's actually basic, but it's how you explain it.
Yeah.
It's how you talk about it. It's the examples you use, then whether or not somebody's going to relate or they're just going to look at you and be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get it. No, I don't have any questions.
Yeah. So you spent several years or, a few years kind of researching and compiling data and educating / going to different training seminars, interviewing subject matter experts, et cetera. And it all kind of culminated to your book, correct? Mm-hmm. And so what I'd love to do, I've gone through it, and I'd like to kind of go through it and summarize each chapter, not so far in the weeds till we're just reading the book, but just kind of give a synopsis of what it's about and kind of hit the highlights if you're good with that. So I'll read the kind of from the table of contents standpoint, and we'll just kind of go over it. So I'm assuming that chapter 1, Daria's story is kind of, was that, I guess reading this or knowing about it was kind of the catalyst to help drive writing the book?
No, actually, writing the book was out of frustration during the pandemic because I couldn't get out and teach, and then I was like, I'm just going to get a job, and I wanted to be in that threat assessment, in helping keep people safe space, and because I didn't have the background, people were like, I'm going up against people who are retired from the FBI, so I'm get the 4th round, and I'm not going to get picked, and I was like, finally the last one, I was like, if I don't get this job, I'm writing a book. I didn't get the job.
Yeah.
But no, so that was very much like I knew I'm going to write a book, and was working with a company. Like, well, you gotta hook them with that first chapter. People will read the first chapter and decide whether they want to keep reading. And I was like, okay, but if someone uses good situational awareness and nothing happens, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, we'll figure that out later. Just start writing. And a police chief from our area who knew what I was doing, who had been following me, reached out and said, hey, I have someone I want to introduce you to. He introduced me to to Daria, and he's like, or he met with me first, told me her story, and he's like, do you want to meet with her? And I was like, I would love to if she's open to it. She knows I'm married to a cop, right? He's like, yep. I was like, okay. And so we connected, and she told me her story, and I mean, it was very impactful to me in the sense of I was like, wow. You know, you hear these stories or you get the snippets in articles, and then to hear first person is, I mean, just breaks your heart. And so I asked her, can I use your story? Because so much of what she kept saying is there was all these things where, you know, he wasn't physically beating me, so there wasn't signs. And because of who he was in the community, a law enforcement officer, then it would be my word against his. He knew exactly the line that he could go up to and not cross and be just fine. And who was going to believe me? Like all of the psychological torture or abuse that he put her through. And she was, I'm not ready to come out. In fact, she's technically still in hiding, which is, it breaks my heart. But she's like, you can tell the story, obviously change names. And so that's who I worked with, because to me it's, okay, it doesn't, the whole point to me is situational awareness is like, we're trying to get way before they're even in a domestic abuse situation. So what are some of those really early warning signs? What are some of those things situationally aware that you need to be situationally aware of to understand, okay, something's off, but I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
But this is the person I'm supposed to be with, and I don't want to get divorced, so I'm just going to go with it. Or sickness and health, like how do I enforce my boundaries, but yet be in a relationship? And so I loved, sounds so bad, I loved the complexity and the honesty and the reality that she was dealing with, and that she was willing to let me tell her story.
Can you give us, A, the Reader's Digest version of her story, and B, the signs that she missed that you picked up and now recommend to pay attention to?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, she was a headstrong. It's a lot of times I hear that so often, like, oh, it could never happen to this person. They're such a strong, confident woman at work, or man. You know, I don't want people to get upset at me. Yes, I know abuse happens to men too. And so to her, some of the early signs when they were dating was he viewed her as a challenge. Like, I'm going to see if I can control her because she seems so uncontrollable, or she seems so independent. And so it was little things of, no, let me do this for you. Let me take care of that. Or you know, nope, I've got this. Very, oh, well, that's helpful. But to the point of he's planning her bachelorette. He's planning her bridal shower. Like, no, you know, and when she would try and give input, it was very much like, no, I want you to be the princess. I want you to relax. I will plan this all. Which, again, you're like, oh, okay, that's nice, but that's a little odd. My fiance planning my bachelorette. But again, it was all those little things where she was like, I can't quite put my finger on it. And overall, what happened is those controlling, I'm in charge, I make the decisions, escalated and increased to the point where he had a contract that he made her and their kids sign. Like, you will do this, you won't do this. One example in the book is he would come home and open the dishwasher and count how many dishes to see if she had company. Like, her mom lived across the street but couldn't come over without first asking him for permission. And if so, then he preferred they sit outside. And it's Minnesota, so it's not necessarily warm all year round.
Yeah.
But very, you know, if you go out, I'm going to be texting you all the time. Where are you? When are you coming home? What are you doing? All those type of things. And because it was the slow drip, you're like, oh, but he never beat her physically. And the end, you know, it got to the point where he was holding the gun to her head, threatening to kill her. But again, not pistol whipping her, not doing whatever. It's the psychological. And thankfully she had thought to turn on the recording device on her phone. And so she caught it all. And when her kids ran across the street, called 911, which is, again, the small town. He's law enforcement in that town. And so it's like his boss showing up and fellow officer. And they separate them. And she gave the impression that the officer knew what was going on. Like, there was enough little hints that this officer was picking up on, like, come on, just tell me the truth. And she's like, I can't, because what are you going to do? It's my word against his. I have nothing. And then she was like, and the officer said, it only gets worse. And that's when she decided to share the recording. And that's ultimately what led to it. But like I say in my book, in all the years she had dreamed of getting away, of breaking free, she imagined months, years. She had 48 hours before he was released. So now it's like, okay, I've now kicked the hornet's nest, made him super mad, and I have to go into hiding. And I can't talk to my friends. I can't talk to my support network. I can't tell him where I am. I have to be so careful with everything. And so that's the reality of when people are like, why don't you just leave? It's like, there's so much more to it than just that. And because of his resourcefulness, he had ways and means to try and track her down. He was an investigator. He had those skills. He'd been trained. How do you find someone? And so for her, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, that sure sounds like it. It's pretty dicey. Chapter 2, the real enemy of women.
Yep.
What do you think? Who is the real enemy of women?
I think it's not trusting our gut.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's the number one thing?
Yes, because we find in younger females or kids in general, they have no filter. They're going to tell you exactly what they think. They're going to tell you exactly how they feel, whether or not it's, emotionally intelligent. They're at an age where they're trying to figure that out. The frontal lobe hasn't developed. And so kids are brutally honest, and they just instinctually know. I had a woman call me and tell me a story, and she said, 38 years ago this happened to me. And I just finally had the confidence to come forward and talk about it. And
was that a result of reading your book?
I don't know if she'd read the book, but she'd been following, and we'd known each other for a long time. But she said, I was 4 and I was molested by the male babysitter. And she goes, I didn't know how to tell it. I was 4. But I hid locked myself in the bathroom the whole time. And then my parents just knew something is up, and they went through it. And at the time, again, that's her story to tell. But at the time she was like, I was 4. I didn't know how to articulate anything. All I knew was something was bad, and I don't want to be around this person.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think we instinctually have those survival skills of like, this is not good, but we don't know how to articulate it. And so we just react in ways. And if the people around us are like, why are you acting up? Why are you getting so ornery, whatever it may be, without taking a beat and going, well, this is a change in behavior. What's happened? What's changed? Then it can get missed.
All right, guys, as you know, I'm into health and fitness and specifically how nutrition relates to it. Coffee has been a staple of mine and I think most people's for a long time. As you know, I'm a big proponent of Mudwater, which is a sponsor of this show. They have been for a while now, and we have a great partnership. I love their product. It's a phenomenal alternative to coffee. For me, coffee, there's jitters, there's mold in it. A lot of times it tends to kind of upset my stomach. But Mudwater has adaptogenic mushrooms. There's a fraction of the caffeine that coffee has. There's a little bit, but it's very, very little. And it really leans on mushrooms and the blend of matcha and chai for kind of that sustained energy that continues to go and doesn't crash the way coffee does when it runs out. They use lion's mane for alertness, cordyceps to support physical performance, chaga and reishi to support the immune system, turmeric for soreness, and cinnamon for antioxidants. I really enjoy that first cup of warm liquid in the morning by taking Mudwater instead of coffee, and I'll put just a splash of heavy cream or even some protein powder, some collagen powder, and I also throw usually a couple drops of stevia or monk fruit vanilla to make it kind of a thick, normal morning coffee ritual type of concoction. And I got to tell you, it does wonders for me, and I'm really, really glad that I switched. It's been, a better part of a year now, that I've been taking that and using that as part of my daily morning routine, and it's fantastic. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. It's 100% USDA, organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher certified. And they also donate to the Berkeley Center for Science of Psychedelics, which is groundbreaking and leading research to help veterans with PTSD and other associated illnesses and syndromes. So great cause, great company, phenomenal product. If you go to Mudwater, that's mudwtr.com/Mike to support this show and the product, and use the code MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. That's, again, Mudwater, MUDWTR.com/Mike, and the code is MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. Go check them out. So what would your advice be to a woman that says, okay, I need to trust my gut, something feels off, I'm not even sure what it is, what the fuck do I do about it?
Context matters. I always just say, unless it's a true fear signal of like, okay, my spine's tingling, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up, then I just say, get out, get away, whatever. Again, context matters. Get to safety type thing. So whether you're in an environment and somebody in the space's behaviors is making you super uncomfortable, but otherwise our intuition is, and I love, Gavin DeBecker puts it in his book, Gift of Fear, always in response to something, and it always has our best interest in mind. So I like to say, it's not your prankster, annoying little brother picking on you, jumping out from behind the corner. It's not scaring you intentionally, or it's not faking you out, so to speak. Psych. It's, hey, something in your environment's off, and I'm thinking of your safety first. Yeah. So I need you to pay more attention. So when people say, well, something's off, I'm like, just pay more attention to what's off. What about it? And get curious, as long as you can stay safe. And in my trainings a lot to break down, because right away we have a tendency to go into like worst case scenarios, especially as females when we're like thinking about it being attacked. Is I'm like, your taste buds, your sense of taste. Have you ever drank spoiled milk? I'm amazed at how many people, by the way, have drank expired milk, because I usually get about half the class like, oh yeah, I drank. Okay, I didn't realize that was such a prominent thing. Yeah. But I'm like, your intuition immediately, before you have it in your mouth, your taste buds are like, something's wrong, it's spitting it out almost naturally, so quick. That's your intuition. It's the same thing. It's a basic survival skill. It has your best intentions, or best interest in mind, and it's reacting to something. It's reacting to spoiled milk. So don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it.
Would you say, or I guess I would ask, why do you think so many people, because I don't think it's just women, but in this context, why do you think so many women ignore that and don't listen to it?
I think because it gets second guessed a lot of times. Are you sure you saw that shadowy figure when you were walking? Are you sure they were following you? Maybe they just had a car parked next to you.
Maybe you watch too many true crime episodes.
Right, you're listening to too many murder podcasts, whatever, true crime. But so often, though, and right about, in my perspective, and I'm sure there's studies, and I've read lots of them, and I can't cite them all. So, I'm happy if anybody wants to question me, go ahead and look them up. In that middle school to high school age, they're still like got a little bit of the spitfire in them, but they get a sense of offness from someone. That's when the hormones are hitting, puberty is hitting, and what Hollywood sells us is romantic, is persistence, or what seems okay. But if I'm not okay with it, that's okay. But you're just being uptight. Oh, you're probably overreacting. You're reading too much into it. It's second guessed. Yeah. And those behaviors are really, if we're not taught how to articulate them, or just to say, it doesn't matter if you're okay with, sarcasm, I'm not. Or if you're okay with those type of jokes, I'm not. It's okay to say that's not okay with me and that's my boundary, and let it go. But that's where it'll get pushed around at that age. And I think, and it continues to happen, so it's not like it's only at that age, but then we leave our safety bubble of high school where we've probably grown up with these people. We probably know their relatives, probably know a lot more about their past, and then we're thrust into the world. And everyone's a stranger, right? And so for our whole life, we've been told, don't talk to strangers, versus pay attention to these behaviors. Well, now everyone's a stranger. And those behaviors can be displayed by people we know. So it can get really confusing. And so that's where you don't always know why your intuition is going off because it happens so fast. Going back to blank Malcolm Gladwell's book or heuristics, but something's off.
Yeah.
And so learning to trust your intuition and say, you know what, I don't feel like going out right now, or I'm going to take this route to work today, or I'm going to go running on this path today.
Yeah. Which is a good segue into chapter 3, which is what is situational awareness anyway?
So when I started, that was always my question. What is situational awareness? What do you mean? And to me, I define it as using all of your senses and your intuition to observe your surroundings. Okay? So just observing. We're not looking for danger. We're just being observant. And then it's noticing when something is off. So what's there and shouldn't be, kind of like the anomaly baseline conversation. What just seems like it shouldn't be there or should be there and it's missing. And then what does that mean to your safety? Well, is there danger? Is there not? Might not be. And then taking action to preserve your safety. So whatever that means. It could be, gosh, I don't know, I'm walking down the street and someone's coming and their behavior, the way they're walking, I'm just going to step into the store. Or I feel like I'm maybe being followed, so I'm going to go left instead of right. Or I'm going to go to a more public area. If they don't keep following you, great. But if they do, it's better to err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
So it's trying to not always go straight to, you're going to die if you don't do this. Let's have a real conversation.
Yeah. One thing that I guess I think of when people bring that term up or even ask me about it is kind of using context to drive your level of alertness and situational awareness. Not having the same level of guard down and comfort that you would on your couch while you're filling up your gas tank. Is that anytime you're moving from one environment to another, do a really quick kind of mental press check of what's the environment I'm going in, how public is it, how potentially dangerous is it. Like the more open and less safe that it potentially may be, the more I need to not be staring at my phone and daydreaming as to whatever, and kind of use that as a driving force to at least say, okay, like it's 10:30 at night, I'm at a gas station, I should probably pay closer attention than staring at Facebook and whatever while I'm filling up, being oblivious to what's around me. But from a I guess from the book standpoint, is there, I guess, a classical definition or one that you would prescribe to as it relates to defining situational awareness?
No, I don't. Classical in the sense, everything that I found is typically more of, comes from the military law enforcement perspective, so it can get, to me, confusing.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to simplify it of situational awareness isn't always looking for a threat, because being situationally aware might also mean you see more sunrises. You notice more sunsets. You notice the trees blooming, whatever it may be. And so trying to get down to even you talking about, okay, I'm at a gas station, you're running this checklist in your head. So sometimes when we're like, okay, we'll just think about this, this, and this. And so then people are in an environment thinking of a checklist, but they're looking for danger versus, and when we get nervous, when our adrenaline goes up, tunnel vision, our hearing cuts down. So it's like, how can I keep you calm and be like, hey, it's not so much about the checklist. How about you look around? Just look around. Because again, a predator watching a prey is like, oh, they're paying attention. They're not on their phone. I'm going to wait for somebody not paying attention. And it's breaking down into those little steps that when you get good at it, you do it at a subconscious level. It's really hard to talk about. Yeah. Like, oh no, just do this. But it's building these skills, giving confidence instead of overwhelming of like, oh my gosh, if I do 5 of the 6 steps, I'm going to get attacked.
Yeah.
I got to do them all. And then you're constantly stressed and on high alert.
Yeah. No, it's a great point for sure. Chapter 4, am I being followed? Depends on how good they are, I guess.
Right? That's a fear a lot of women have shared with me is, what if I'm being followed? What if in the parking lot, in the parking ramp? on a trail. I mean, the amount of stories that are out there about women being attacked while out for a run or out for a walk are unfortunately too regular. And so that is a real concern comes up. How do I tell if I'm being followed? What can I do? And so talking about reflective surfaces, you know, and it's not always a mirror, but it could be your phone. Be like, pretend you're taking a selfie, but then you can use it to see behind you. You know, when you're standing at in the pandemic days, when you were standing at a counter and the plastic sheets are all hanging down, you could actually use that to see behind you. It doesn't have, or just look over your shoulder. You can do that too. And so it's trying to think of, okay, in your everyday life, look for reflective surfaces and make it fun.
Yeah.
Make it a game. I'm not making light of being followed, but if you are, here's some ways you can handle it. Or like the example I use in the book, you can turn around and ask them, can I help you?
Yeah.
Are you following me? Because if they're not, they're going to be like, oh, I am so sorry. I did not mean to make you feel that way. Because most of humanity is good and kind.
And
so,
not following you.
And not following you. So if you do, it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
But if they were and had bad intentions, you're going to be really glad that you chose to do that, because then they're going to, by their response to your question, you're going to know.
Yeah.
And now you're going to know, oh, wait, something's up. I need to take the next step, whatever it may be.
No, it's great advice. I'm going to combine chapter 5 and 6 because I think they kind of synergize that way. It's I don't want to be rude, and persistence is not always a good thing. And I'll kind of caveat it or pretext it with it's something I've run into, you know, in trying to raise two daughters and you know, hearing their kind of explanations of, you know, if I say, well, you know, did this not stand out as being maybe a little over the top, or like, well, I just, you know, he's a nice guy. It's like guys aren't inherently nice, you know, to women for no fucking reason. I mean, most of the time. Like, there's of course examples. I mean, there's times where I'm nice. You know, there's times where any guy is nice, but there's where I think, you know, your point of the context playing such a role. It's like if he reaches out to you and is almost bugging you to help you, it's not because he's a nice fucking guy. You know, he wants something from you. And the persistence is not always a good thing too. Like I'm right there with you in the kind of the almost Hollywood fairy tale of, not that this is a direct correlation, but it's like the 50 Shades of Grey thing. If that dude's broke, he's a fucking predator.
Yes. Oh, I use that example all the time.
You know, like, and so, yeah, there's some, I think, mixed messages that come from our pop culture as it relates to, you know, what's desirable or not. And I think it really leads, you know, young women down the wrong road of expectations. But so if you can kind of combine the I don't want to be rude and persistence is not always a good thing.
The I don't want to be rude, I'll start with that. I hear that often from women. Well, they started a conversation while we were standing in line at the coffee shop, and I didn't want to talk to them, but I didn't want to be rude. Okay, but if you weren't looking at them or making eye contact or saying hi, you're on your phone figuring out your order or whatever, if they're interrupting you, that's actually what's rude. And so keeping that perspective of if I'll share this example. I had a friend who had gone through a divorce, and so she's single, not dating yet, but her daughter was on the same volleyball team of another girl whose dad was also single and was going through divorce. And she had left the game early, whatever, had stuff to do, and he called, like, trying to be really kind. Like, hey, you just looked upset when you were leaving the game tonight. I want to check and see if everything's okay. And she's like, everything's okay. It's fine. You know, it's been a long day. I haven't eaten yet. I'm going to go get some food, run home. And he keeps talking to her. Well, do you want me to come over and talk? You know, do you need to talk? And she's like, no.
No, Dr. Phil, I don't.
No, I need food. I need to, you know, let my dog out, whatever. And this carried on. Like, he wouldn't get off the phone. But she's like, I didn't want to be rude. Yeah. I didn't want to be like, bye, and hang up. And I was like, okay. So she's telling the story. And she gets her food, gets home, pulls into her garage, gets out, you know, and she's got her laptop bag in her purse and the food. The dog's barking in the house. And there's dude sitting at the end of her driveway.
Yeah.
So even though she had said, no, I don't want company. No, don't come over. No, I'm good. He's still then, and then she stood there and talked to him. And again, this is nothing against her, but her thing was, I didn't want to be rude.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not rude. You told him numerous times that you didn't want him to come over, and he did. So that's actually rude. But it's changing that perspective, because right away it's like, oh, well, I'll be a bitch if I say anything. I'll be viewed as, snooty or too good for them if I don't accommodate. And it's like, no, actually not.
Can you do chapter 5.5, It's Okay to Be a Bitch?
Yeah, sure. We probably should.
That'd be a good one.
And that too is subjective. Well, I don't want to be a bitch. Well, what do you think is being a bitch?
Yeah.
Standing up for yourself? You can be nice and be direct.
Yeah.
Being direct isn't rude.
Yeah.
So
does that fall into the persistence is not always a good thing, that being that same example?
That falls into, if anyone's watched the I Am a Stalker on Netflix series, it's just very much like that. Again, Hollywood, we'll just call it Hollywood, portrays that as, oh, then they must really be interested in you. And I will say this, is that message gets sent to young men. I thought of it with my kids as how it's like, oh no, even if they tell you, with elderly neighbors, okay, go pick up sticks in the yard, whatever. No, we don't want you to pick up sticks. It's fine, totally fine. What would we say? No, you do that. You do that. You be kind for someone. You go help them out, even if they told you no. So it's this weird, like, oh God, I never thought of that. Because raising two boys, I have that perspective now. It's like, well, how could this be misinterpreted of, even my boys now, how many times do I tell my kids, stop beating on each other, leave each other alone? And they're like, whatever. And I'm like, no, if somebody says, no, they don't want to be tickled, no, they don't, whatever, you have to respect that.
Yeah.
Even though your boy's beating on each other, and I'm totally for that kind of like physicality, roughhousing. Yeah. I got to be careful with the messaging.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that needs to be, across the board, but, both ways. Mm-hmm. Is that your final answer?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Chapter 7. That's your final answer.
Yes. The whole, no, thank you. And then ask you again and ask you again. It's which is always funny when I first read Gavin Becker's Gift of Fear, because I had come from some of that sales background. I was like, oh my God, I've done these things to people. I'm a horrible person. In sales 101, get 7 no's to get to the 8th yes.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, when you're trying to sell a car.
Yeah.
But when it comes to personal boundaries, no. And so the whole, if that's what you want, don't change your mind. Like if you don't want them to come over, don't want to have a conversation, don't let their are you sure? Are you sure? Change your mind.
Yeah.
So if that's your final answer,
let it be your final
let
answer.
it be.
And I think this it kind of all goes almost sequential in looking at the chapters. What's my obligation? Mm-hmm. I think that's a big one where kind of in that same vein of I don't want to be rude, is that there's like a tying of, well, I feel obligated to help or entertain or not be an asshole or what have you.
Yes, a lot of times the caretaking nature gets played. That tends to be stronger in women. Well, I want to take care of someone. Oh, they just need a shoulder. They just need someone to talk to. And so those manipulators, they'll try and find the hooks. Okay, she doesn't want to go on a date with me. She doesn't want to hang out with me.
So let me make her feel sorry for me. Like I need help.
Oh, I just need someone to talk to. Or, hey, you're in this career field and I could use some advice. And then you're like, well, maybe they do really need financial advice. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so then it's the hook. Well, are you obligated? No. Just because they asked you, yes, I get it. Be kind, be nice. But you can tell the difference between when they're fishing and when they're honestly asking for input or advice.
Well, I think a good litmus or gatekeeper mechanism for that is, if that's what you do for a living, charge people.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, can I get some advice? Yeah, you can. Sign up for this, $100 an hour Zoom one-on-one lesson, and I'll give you all the fucking advice I can in an hour. Mm-hmm. And just be direct that way. Like, yeah, I'm happy to help, but this is what I do for a living. Like, I don't go to your job and ask you for free shit or to do your job for free because I need help. It's the same thing. And I think to pinpoint like one litmus to keep that kind of angle in check is that, especially if it's what you do for a living. If women out there are nutritionists or, you know,
trainers.
Yeah, I mean, you name it. It's like, oh, hey, my, you know, whatever. I mean, yeah, I can see what you mean. Like, that's an easy in to, like, okay, this is a valid reason for me to be talking to this person, and then they try to use that to, you know, further whatever. But
and not to interrupt you, excuse me, but women
bullshit.
use that. Women use that on each other too.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing. When Daria read the book, she was like, obviously, it's my life story a little bit, but she said, I still blew me away because when you talked about it from like a friendship basic or like a female to female, she's like, oh shit, I had never thought of that. I had always thought again, men are the enemy, or it's the men abusing women. And it's like, no. If we focus on behaviors, we get back to it, pretty soon you can see your obligation. Do you have the one friend who, you know, is always is draining? And I hate to say this, but it's true. She's always calling and just complaining about the world, and nothing is ever okay, and nothing ever goes right, but there's no personal responsibility. It's like, that's the same thing. You do not have an obligation to spend 2 hours of your precious time every night or all the time. You can have an emotional boundary with that person too, even though it's your friend.
Yeah, for sure. And that, to me, I want to reiterate, like, that goes both ways too. You know, there's certainly examples of women doing that to men where it's, you know, the kind of roles are reversed, or, you know, men doing it to men professionally or women to women, you know, professionally or friendship wise or whatever. So it's not just in the context of men trying to be sleazy, sliding into the DMs of some woman that they're trying to hook up with or whatever, but turning the tables.
See, and this is where I'm like, okay, got to give me a scenario context. A lot of times it's turning the tables. I think of two ways. Is you can always, well, why are you asking that? So turn that conversation around. Get curious with them. Ask them a question back, because they're not expecting that. They're expecting you to feel obligated to answer yes or no, give an excuse, give a reason, whatever. And I also say to turn the tables is, how good are you at respecting other people's boundaries? You know, I share the story, my youngest, he has a very wide palate. Like, he loves mushroom and spinach pizza. And, you know, I, of course, I'm doing my whole, like, okay.
And he's 9?
Yeah. Oh, no, he loves mussels.
That's weird.
He loves seafood.
That's awesome.
I know, I love it. And also cuts into my food plate, usually. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, I'm going to eat this healthy food. He's eating his delicious smelling pizza. And I was like, hey, buddy, can I have a slice of pizza? And he's like, Mom, I love you, but no. And I would, you know, and I wanted to do the whole, I paid for that fucking pizza. You live in my house. You're 8, you know? And at the same time, I was like, hold up. Pizza's not life or death. That's him enforcing a boundary. Do I need to eat the pizza? No. Do I want to? Yes. And then my husband, of course, was like, I'm going to get him to do it. My husband was like, hey, buddy, can I have a piece of pizza? And he's like, no.
Yeah. Not even that.
Not even. No. He's more gentle. Yeah. He loves his mother.
That's awesome. So speaking of morning routine, and really throughout the day, you know, health and fitness and overall well-being is something that I focus on as I get older. I get more and more kind of in tune with what works and what doesn't. And I recently started working with Ketone IQ, which is hvmn.com. This product is a really, really good way to start the day, as well as basically just anytime you need a boost from an energy standpoint. You're getting ready to do something physically demanding, mentally demanding. You know, before I record, I take a shot. First thing in the morning I do before workouts, to recover after workouts. You know, I take it multiple times a day, and there's no sugar, it's vegan, there's no caffeine, there's no salt, gluten, no artificial flavors or sweeteners, and it works from a ketogenic standpoint, giving your brain and body the fuel that it needs to do tasking tasks. So, you know, it's a phenomenal product, an amazing company. That's hvmn.com. And the code is mic drop, all one word, all caps, for 20% off. I can't recommend this product enough for, again, getting going in the morning, pre-workout, post-workout. You're tired in the afternoon. It's a super healthy way to feed your brain and your body from that kind of glycogen replenishment standpoint that tends to crash a lot of people when they're using caffeine products or carb products, et cetera. So I love this stuff. I use it several times throughout the day, and I encourage you guys to check it out as well. It's hvmn.com, and that code is mic drop for 20% off, all caps, all one word. Yeah. Is there an example that, I mean, if you can provide the context and an example of turning the table that that's either something common or that you've seen before?
You mean in turning the tables in the conversation?
In any way, I guess. That you would say, here's an example of that, so that if you find yourself in a situation like this, here's how I would handle it.
Okay, so I will set this up with, I'm a talker. Like, I will talk your ears off for as long as you want. That's not always the safest thing to do when you're traveling. But I'm curious about people. So the turning the tables for me, without giving away a lot of information, like, hey, are you from here? Are you here for work? How long are you staying? All these questions that seem small talk when you're traveling, especially for women, is, okay, we'll turn the tables. Ask them the questions. You know, I mentioned meeting my mentor on an airplane when he kind of came to the rescue and threw my family a lifeline, giving me a job. We had sat next to each other on an airplane, and he starts asking lots of questions. And as soon as someone's asking me questions, and especially the first time I've met him, I try and turn around and ask and talk about them, or I find out something they're interested in and get them talking.
Yeah.
And because it's not that I want to be rude, but I also don't know you. I'm not going to give away a lot of information about myself, but I want to have a conversation and be a kind person. And most people like talking about themselves.
Yeah.
So we were on this, and it was two legs and a plane sat next to each other, but he talked about himself the whole time, and not in a bad way. Like, I was, oh, tell me more about that. Okay, tell me about this. Tell me about this charity you created. Tell me. And it was a great conversation. And like I said, led to him being my mentor. Yeah. But once I came to work for him, he was like, first time I met Kelly, she was the most fascinating person I met. And I was like, I didn't say a word.
I asked you.
So that turning the tables, because a lot of time, it's amazing. And this sounds horrible, but what information people will give you by just asking a couple questions. You can find out where they went to school. Yeah. You know,
what
where
their
they
social
live,
security number.
Pretty much. Oh, wait, you know, you have this uncle and.
Yeah. What their bowel movement that morning was like. No, to me, there's a second part to that too, is that if there is ill intentions and you do that, I think you find out very quickly that they're there for the wrong reasons, or they're trying to talk to you for potentially nefarious reasons, because they're not going to want to talk to them about themselves, and they're going to get frustrated and keep trying to, you know, and when you stonewall them, it's just going to piss them off, and they'll be like, fuck it, I'm not talking to them.
I actually have a video that someone shared with me, which I love. I love when my followers are like, hey, Kelly, did you see this? Talk about this. And it was a young female in what looks like a clothing store, and some dude's coming up to her trying to talk to her. And you can tell she doesn't want to talk to him, but she doesn't want to be rude, but she's uncomfortable. And he's asking these more personal line questions. And as much as she's like being short with him, no, yes, no, not interested, no, thank you, he keeps asking. And so that's a great video of like, she did great, not falling into, let me have this conversation. And if you feel like you're stuck and you don't have to stay there. If you turn and walk away, and you're like, oh my God, this feels so awkward walking away from someone as they're talking to me. Again, they're being rude by interrupting you. Yeah. And you can look at clothes and not be interrupted. And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
So let's focus on what society says is rude and what's not rude.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Right?
You're never going to, that's what I always say. I'm awesome at enforcing boundaries with strangers because I'll never see you again. I don't care.
Yeah.
Which again, where it gets sticky is the acquaintance, the coworker that's inappropriate that you have to go. Are you going to leave your job?
The fucking boss, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a whole nother can of worms, probably.
Yep, and that's where it's like, yes, I'd love to throat punch you right now, but that's going to be assault, and I'm going to get charged and lose my job.
So I mean, that's probably one of the more prominent, really tough situations that I could see a woman finding herself in is a job or career employment, what have you, where it's somebody in a position of authority above her that's doing these things, and so now she's worried about losing her job or whatever. Do you have a recommendation? Is it just be more nuanced in boundary setting or what?
You know, and I chuckle because I think about my own experiences, and you feel stuck. What can I do? What is that? Like my husband and I always talk about what is sexual assault? What is inappropriate? Because what's inappropriate for one person might not be for the next.
It's foreplay for the next.
Right. Yeah. And, or how can you, the laws, like there's the spirit of the law, there's the letter of the law. And so often law enforcement gets caught. Like, I get it. That sucks. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And there's really nothing we can do, which they don't want to say that, but they can't. Like, they're not false accusations. And again, that's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother conversation. But for me, it's very much calling it out. I think I shared it in the book, but I had a situation where, you know, sitting watching football at a hotel lobby bar while we're both traveling, and I'm getting into the game and I'm cheering or whatever, and I'm getting excited, and he reaches over and starts rubbing the back of my neck, and I'm like, wait, is that, you know, I froze. I was like, wait, what's happening right now? And he put his hand away, and then it was like nothing. But after that, I was like, what just happened? And that really wasn't appropriate, it wasn't appropriate. But so, and that was, you know, whatever at the conference. But now I'm stuck at the conference with you the whole time, riding in Ubers. I'm having to
act like nothing happened. Did you act like nothing happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did until when we got home, and then I said, hey, that was not okay with me. And you could see the uncomfortableness. Oh, well, what, I thought you were getting really upset. I'm like, I was watching a football game. Yeah. I was getting excited, but calling it out in a calm manner. Yeah. At that moment, I probably would have been over emotional. Yeah. And like, what the, yeah. You know, yeah, you're my boss. But calling it out and doing it in a private manner, not necessary. And this is where I go, yes. Do you want to do something in a more public space and call them out? Yes. Is that going to give you the best outcome for you? Probably not. I had the personal one-on-one conversation in private. And after that, it was very much like, I've drawn a hard boundary. There was no conversation after that in a bad way about it. It was kind of like, oh, because I also taught him, or that sounds bad. I didn't teach him, but I showed him, I communicated, I will say something. Yeah. And I will say it, and I will be very direct, and then we can move on.
Was there any fallout?
I don't know. I mean, eventually I wasn't working there anymore, but it was kind of one of those, like, to me, there was no fallout in, what are you going to do?
So I'm going to fucking fire you, or stonewall your promotion, or give you the shitty tasks or whatever.
And those are all things that people have to think about, and I get that. But never be afraid to stand up for yourself in a direct and polite way, like taking out the emotions of things, saying, that's not okay with me. Yeah. We're good. Don't do it again.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, again, I'm not naive to, hey, you just got this job and that's the only one you have and you got bills to pay and you're worried about getting fired. But I think obviously everybody has to make their own decision for how much they're willing to compromise in terms of putting up with that shit. But I would say I think a good kind of happy medium is to say, like, handle it the way you handled it. And if there is fallout, like, there's got to come a certain point where you say, like, do I want to work for somebody like that? You know, like, to me, the answer should be fucking no. Is that if they do something, you know, whether maybe they didn't think it was inappropriate and you did, and then, like, once that line is drawn, at that point, like, anything past it now is intentional. Mm-hmm. And so now they're disrespecting you, they're disrespecting your wishes, your boundaries. And so at that point, it's like, yeah, if you're stuck and you've got no other fucking choice, like, I'd still rather not have a job than work for somebody that I felt that uncomfortable around.
And sometimes helping, what I've found is women will send me messages or call me or reach out to me because they don't want to be public. So I'll get these, like, private messages, and talking through it. Yeah. They know the answer. They need to hear someone say, you're right. Yeah. I'm validating your feelings, and not in a bad way. I'm not trying to be condescending, but it's very much because we're questioning all these societies of, like, oh, was that bad? Was that not bad? Am I going to be believed? It's going to be easy. It's like, that all doesn't matter. Do you feel comfortable? Okay. And now going forward, might not be a bad idea to brush up your resume. Yeah. So that if it does happen again, you're ready to take action. Like, I told you that was not okay. Here's my 2 weeks. See you later.
Yeah. I think, you know, a really, really key and important point that you brought up that has two I think, critical components to it is, one, wait until you're not emotional about it, and two, do it in private. Because if you're emotional and you embarrass a superior, a coworker that's positional authority-wise above you in front of a bunch of other people, like, you're kind of putting them in a corner where they're probably going to do something fucking stupid or retaliatory or
it's going to be the he said, she said. I didn't do that.
Yeah, you're fucking crazy,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You grabbed my ass. Sharp kids.
Yeah. That's one thing I get, which is always ironic to me, which a lot of times it starts out, people reach out and say, I need your book for my daughter. I need your book for my kids. How can I help my kids? Because I'm a female, women, we want to protect our kids. I just posted about this, talking about the mama bear thing. Like, that is completely, I can rip your throat out and people be like, oh, you were protecting your kids. Good job, Mom. You're such a good mom. But if I do that to defending myself, society's like, do you think you went a little far?
Yeah.
So women are very much like, how do I protect my kids? And that's completely okay. And I'm going to have this conversation. And they're like, but I don't want to scare them. And so how do we talk to our kids? How can we start building these skills in a fun way, in a playful way? And so that's probably the number one question I get. How do I teach my kids? How do I talk to them? And unfortunately, a lot of the threats to their safety are coming online. So it's coming younger. It's getting younger.
And it's in your house.
Because
it's,
and you think, oh, I think this is safe. And you're like, wait, does it have a chat?
Yeah.
What's going on in the chat? And so how do we have these conversations? And I always remind people is let them lead the conversation. Let your kids lead the conversation in their curiosity, because that'll tell you where they're at. My kids might say, well, Mom, what does this mean? What do you think it means? Like, in the book I share, my oldest was like, Mom, I know the difference between men and women. I was like, oh, okay.
Good, because I don't.
Shit. Hey, maybe you could have a conversation with some people that are in the media.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, buddy, what do you think it is? And he's like, women have long hair and men don't, because my husband's bald. And I was like, you're right, buddy. Sometimes that's the case. And that was fine for him. So, another time he's like, Mom, what does homeless mean? Oh, okay. Right away my head goes like Wikipedia. Okay, so this, and then I was like, well, wait a minute. Why are you asking, buddy? Oh, because the guy in the corner is holding the sign.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And I was like, oh, well, let's look it up, on our handy dandy Wikipedias or dictionaries right here. It's like somebody without a house. Oh, okay. Makes sense to them. Because when you start elaborating and this is what I always say is really cool, to turn the tables on yourself. What did you think when I said homeless? What was the description that came to your mind? And that's where you can see maybe some of your biases. Where did that come from? Why do I think it's all this? Why did I automatically put this association with the word homeless?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so doing that self-awareness that's going to help you too, of why with your intuition sends you a message saying something's off. Why are you scared of that? Have you ever experienced that? Or did somebody tell you should be scared of that?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think it's good for everybody to self-evaluate on a regular basis, any potential bias they might have in every way. One of the things that, kind of delving further into the kids' safety thing that I think is, at least from my both perspective and experience, is key is those conversations are a lot more powerful and insightful for them than trying to control. Teaching them that trust your gut, self-awareness, situational awareness. Does this seem off? Asking them questions so that they can make those decisions. Because I can tell you, again, from experience, trying to keep them away from that stuff is impossible. Unless you homeschool them and you live off the grid and you control every second of their day, like if they go to I won't even say a public school, especially a public school, but even a private charter school, whatever, like there's still other kids with phones there, there's internet access. And to me, it's better that they have an understanding that stuff exists and how to ask yourself, like, hey, wait a minute, like, does this seem okay, normal, safe, et cetera? There was an example here in Dallas, I think it was last year, where this teenage girl, I think she was 14, 15, maybe younger, 12 maybe, fuck, I don't remember, but she basically had been chatting with this, was supposed to be a teenage boy her age, maybe even a girl, I don't remember, but it was a very innocuous representation of who she was chatting with, and that wasn't who she was chatting with, kind of the typical grooming.
The catfishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But had basically convinced her to get her dad to take her to a Dallas Mavericks basketball game and meet up with this person at the bathroom at halftime. And so she asked her dad, hey, I'd love to go to a game with you, misrepresents it, gets her dad to take her to a basketball game so that when they're there, links up with this person, and they fucking kidnapped her. They managed to recover her within a few days, I think, but that whole scenario, it's just like, if that doesn't fucking terrify you, somebody's ability to over, kind of time and slow rolling a grooming relationship to get your own child to basically con you as a parent into going and doing something so that they can meet up with somebody that you're completely oblivious to is fucking scary.
Yeah.
And to me, you can try to put, all of these controls and parental access to devices, but I can tell you, like, if they go to school, hey, can I borrow your phone quick? Yep. Like, it's a fucking prison network at school, and kids are on each other's phones, and they figure out ways around parental controls at, on school Wi-Fi networks, or they're bringing hotspots that a older brother sold them. There's a million fucking examples of ways around all of these things. And I think, the point I'm trying to bring up is having those conversations with them to try to teach them these skills as early as possible so that they identify the dangers, and it's not us trying to micromanage that, is really important.
I think you bring up a really good point too, is you're not always going to be there.
Yeah.
When they go off to college, when they go off, spread their wings, you shouldn't be a helicopter parent. You can't be. You're going to drive yourself nuts if you're trying to control, because you can't.
Yeah, and it does them a disservice, because now they're woefully underprepared once you're not there. It's even worse.
Well, and you're talking about when you went up north camping or for that week when you were 16. It's like, I can't imagine. I drove when I was 18 or 19 out west to Seattle, road tripped with a girlfriend of mine, hop, skipped, and jumped. And, but I had, instead of saying, don't do that, it was very much like, here's how you read an atlas.
Yeah.
Way back then, here's how you read an atlas. Here's how you count mileage to figure out where you're going to have to stop for gas, blow all these different things. And give kids those skills, because you're only going to give them so many more opportunities. To me, there's so many cool people out there, so many cool adventures, so many great places to see. And if you've only stoked the fires of fear in them, they're going to miss out on some of those cool things.
Yeah. Amen. Vehicle safety.
Yes. So I grew up as a car geek. My dad was a big influence in my life when it came to cars. And so I love everything about it, and have always been interested in studying about cars, whatever it may be. And I didn't realize that was unusual until I got more into my adult years. And there's so much with vehicle safety, because typically women are mom taxis, right? So you're hauling other kids too. But it's real simple things like locking your door automatically when you get in your vehicle, changing your auto unlock so they stay locked when you put it in park. That can improve or increase your chances of safety. And yes, it seems annoying at first, but when carjackings went through the roof after the pandemic, okay, what do I do? How do I handle that? Because typically women, where do I go to ask my vehicle questions? There's already an intimidation factor if something doesn't sound right in the car.
Yeah.
No, I swear it's making the sound, and then it doesn't make the sound for anyone else typically. Yeah. So talking about, I wanted to, hey, I'm going to broach this subject, defensive driving skills, why you park this way. So often it's back into parking spots. Okay, when I go to grocery shop for my 2 growing boys, I need to pull in regularly to get all the groceries in the back of the car. So don't just tell me, no, you should be parking backwards. How can I do this safer? What are things I can do in my vehicle? Just explain it in a way. Let's talk about it in a way that doesn't seem intimidating, or you don't make me feel stupid because I don't know, that blinkers don't need fluid.
Yeah. Muffler belts.
Hey, that's how you hold them up sometimes when they're going to fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Turn the questions back on them, right?
Right.
One thing to add to that, I know this is for houses too. I mean, any glass, period. 3M makes this blast film that is really effective at basically making windows, I mean, not unbreakable, but even if they're broken, almost impossible to get through. And to do, the driver and passenger windows would not be terribly expensive. I don't think you'd really need to do the windshield because it has that protective film that keeps it from completely shattering anyway from the factory as per whatever DOT standard that is. But a carjacker typically isn't going to try to smash the windshield anyway. They're way harder to fuck with. But
that's the first time someone's brought that up to me. I've never thought we have that on our house windows, but not in a car. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, because there are a lot of discrete emergency window breaking tools, that will shatter a fucking window really quickly. Realize that there is a double-edged sword to that, and that in case of an emergency now, EMS isn't going to be able to bust your fucking window. So, keep that in mind.
But caveat, at your own risk.
That's what the jaws of life are for, right? I don't know. Right. I guess you got to determine what, which one's more important to you. But it's something to think about. And again, like whether it's on your windows in your house, your car, or office, or whatever, it's a very effective tool because windows are typically one of the weakest points of any structure, including cars. It's the fastest way somebody's going to get through a locked something.
And this is why I bring these up. Let's just start the conversation.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to say, okay,
at least be thinking about it,
or have these items in your vehicle. Do you know how to use jumper cables? Do you know how to change the car? Does your car even have a spare tire anymore?
Yeah.
That's just a given, and now that's not always.
Yeah, a lot of them don't.
Yeah, they don't come factory with a spare tire. Okay, do you have a run flat? How do you? All these things that growing up, checking your oil, checking your fluids, is we take it for granted, or now everything is electronic, so we're just waiting for the alert to go off, in the dash.
Yeah.
And then do we know what that means when that goes off?
Yeah.
So let's have these conversations because it's going to make them feel empowered. And then if they end up with a flat tire on the side of the road, and I think that's where I put that story is, I was giving a class to a group. It was mostly females, but one guy, and he's sharing a story about how he was trying to be a gentleman. He was trying to be the good guy and help the woman on the side of the road with a flat tire. And so he pulled over in front of her and he walks up and she's like, no, I've got help coming. I don't need any help, thanks. And he, in his story, what he's telling me is like, I knew she was lying. I felt like she was blowing me off, but I was like, fine, whatever. I got to get to my appointment anyway. He left, goes to his appointment. As he's coming back down the same road, she's still there, but now she's putting the tire back on. So he pulls over and he's like, kind of grumbling under his breath, takes the tire iron from her, puts the new tire on, throws the flat in the trunk and all this stuff. And so he's telling me the story and he's like, she just would have let me help her in the first place, then she could have been on her way. And I was like, if that would have been me, you might have ended up in the hospital. Because let me give you the perspective of a female. And in the book, I say, this is what I would have thought. I don't know her. I don't know what she was thinking. But I'm just trying to give you a different perspective is, yes, I get you're trying to be a gentleman. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to help. But understand there is fear in us that we look at you like, I'm on this, not very public road, or, there's not a lot of houses around. That scares me. No, you don't scare me, but the scenario scares me. Yeah. And how do we all learn how to do something? By struggling through figuring it out the first time. So yes, did she take longer than you would have to change your tire? Yes. But did she learn something? Yeah. Okay. Well, isn't that what we really want? Is we want people to try things, fail, try, get better. So, okay. Yes. Was it ideal in your mind? No. But did it hurt? Would it have hurt to just let her do it?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, unless she's driving off and her tire's not completely on.
Yeah. No, it's all super good points. I am a big fan of run flats for anybody that I would say I don't want them in a position where they're sitting on the side of the road with a flat tire. But I think
so. Have you gone through how to do that with your daughters? Like, are they fully, that's awesome.
Yeah. But, to me, I still don't, to pick, like, even though, you know how to do it, do I want you on the side of the road dealing with it? Not particularly. No. I would rather you have a run flat that you're like, oh, shit, it's getting low, and you've still got 40 miles before it's too low to drive on. That would be my preference. But environment, travel, safety.
Yes, so that's another one. When we're traveling, going back to that, well, careful what you say. Yes, you're trying to make small talk. You're trying to be friendly with the Uber driver, the Lyft driver, whatever, or the hotel staff. You don't have to look at everyone as having ill intent, but it doesn't hurt to play it safe. You don't know where you go, all the travel. So how those people are connected, or are they good people or not good people? You don't know. But play on the side of safety. Making your safety a priority should always be at the front of your mind, no matter what. It's not being rude. It's keeping your safety a priority. And so what are little things, that, I didn't even think of that. It's the conversation. When you're outside of the convention space or the meeting space, when you're traveling for work, take the conference badge off. Because what does that scream to everyone? I'm not from here, and I'm only in town for a few days. And it's easy enough to go online and be like, oh, that's the conference. How many days? What's the host hotel? So they're probably staying at this place. Yeah. And
the company's from here. So let me talk about.
Right. Logo wear. Yeah. And I get you can't always choose if you can or can't wear logo wear. But it's like, be aware. Someone's starting a conversation with you like, oh, I see you work at the Diamond Arrow Group. Well, I'm in this. And it's like, oh, are you? Do you have a card? Yeah. Just doing things like that where just be smart, stay sharp, and think of those things when you're traveling, because you are at more of a disadvantage because you're not as familiar with the area. You may not have close contacts. Depending on where you're traveling.
You don't know where you're going.
You don't know what the crime is like. Yeah. You don't know what is a baseline because you haven't established that yet. What's normal. Yeah.
I think kind of going back to chapter 5, that I don't want to be rude, I think kind of in that same vein, like you can be polite without lacking boundaries and oversharing, and you can also put a boundary up and say no without being a bitch, which I think is important, because I think that's what keeps most people from not doing the right thing, is they don't want to be thought of as that, But
and getting used to that. If you haven't had practice enforcing boundaries, it is going to feel odd at first. It is going to feel like, that was rude. Like when they're like, no is a complete sentence. Okay, have you tried just saying no and then not anything else? If you're not used to saying that, it feels awkward. Like, I should probably give an excuse or a reason why I'm saying no. Even with friends, it can feel awkward. But that's the thing, is once you start practicing it and get better, and you don't have to be like, no. Or, I always say, no, get back. Yes, that's a great thing to do if that's what the situation calls for. But if someone's standing a little too close to you and you don't know, are they even aware? Are they just completely oblivious? You don't have to say, back the fuck up. You can say, I know my perfume smells good, but you're standing a little close. I don't want you to burn off your nose hairs. You might want to back up a bit. Depending on how they respond is going to tell you a lot about their intent. If they start laughing, they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. No harm, no foul. And they're going to move away. If someone's like, yeah, it does smell good, you can be like, okay. And go to the next step. You can go to the next level.
Yeah, that's fucking great. I do practice saying no and only no on my kids all the time.
Well, okay. Again, context matters, Mike.
I know it.
As you guys know, health and fitness is a big part of my daily routine and my lifestyle. I have a number of guests that come on that, that we talk about all sorts of things, health and fitness related. Diet, nutrition, etc. I started taking athletic greens a few months ago here for that reason, is that it's a all-encompassing vitamin and mineral supplement, 75 vitamins and minerals. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you do keto, paleo, vegan. It's dairy-free, gluten-free, less than 1 gram of sugar. There's no GMOs or nasty chemicals. There's no artificial anything in it. And it's just very nutrient dense and gives you that supplementation that you need to combat cold and flu season coming up, to bolster your immune system and just help with a healthy lifestyle. Right now, the subscription, if you sign up for it, comes with a year's supply of vitamin D, which again is crucial to immune support. as well as 5 on-the-go packets with that first purchase. Whether you want to invest in your health or just supplement an already existing protocol that you have, Athletic Greens has been a phenomenal staple that I've added into my regimen, and I couldn't be happier to be working with them. If you want in on that deal, go to athleticgreens.com/mic drop. And they do a phenomenal job at all the things that health and fitness wise need to be done on a daily basis. So check them out. Go to athleticgreens.com/mic drop, and they will hook you up with that special deal.
This is only the beginning.
Yes, it is. This is just the beginning of this conversation. But that's why part of me really appreciated you taking the chance and having me on your show, or inviting me to come on your show, or accepting my ask, I guess, to come on your show, because that's what I want. Is I want to have this conversation. There's a lot of misconceptions that I run into. There's a lot of egos that I run into. Because this is typically a male-dominated space. Like, oh yeah, we're talking situational awareness. I'm like, oh, okay, tell me more about that. And they're like, yeah, when the active shooter is in your school and you got to do this. I'm like, that's too late. Yeah. I mean, yes, that is situational awareness. I'm talking about earlier signs.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, one of your more recent guests was talking about school safety, topic on school safety. And I'm like, yes, that's so well needed. And I belong to the Association of Threat Assessment Managers, or professionals, and a lot of our conferences, it's like, we're trying to get way ahead of that.
Yeah.
Let's not wait until the active shooter brings the firearm to school. Let's catch them when they're early, because there's almost always early warning signs. There's almost always leakage, as they say. But there can be a lot of words said without actions. So it's so imperative to be like, there's more, get curious, because there's the planning stages, and that's a whole nother conversation. But really what I'm trying to do with situational awareness, what makes me different, is I'm trying to make the information relatable to anyone. Like, put me down in a coffee shop and say, go talk to that person. Okay, let's talk about this. Where are you at? Where are your strengths? I had someone play devil's advocate with me, and they're like, okay, well, I'm a female and I've never, taken a martial arts class, and I've never handled a firearm, and I've never done this, and blah, I was like, okay, did you play any sports? And they're like, yeah, I played softball. I'm like, great. You've got a great arm, I bet, at throwing, and
you know how to swing a bat too.
You know how to swing a bat. Yeah. Like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about it. So often the lanyards that oftentimes have got like a bazillion things hanging on. It's like, that's a really good whip. You whip that at them. That can be a weapon. So talking about those things, or a tool, that can be a tool to safety, is, okay.
I like weapon better.
How can we have these conversations that they can relate to that makes them feel empowered? Because if we're only saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, that's what gets stuck in their head. It's kind of like the last thing. Well, don't say this word, and then all that in your head is thinking of that word, and you end up saying it.
Yeah.
So how can we take it and say, okay, think about this. Here's the good things. Here's how we're going to break it down. Because my fear is when we only use fear-mongering, when we only use scare tactics, when we only show worst-case scenarios, that's what gets stuck in women's heads, and they're like, I'm going to die. Yeah. This is just going to happen. This is natural. It's like, no, there are other things. And if nothing happens, you'll never know.
Yeah. Well, I think, a couple of points that I draw from that is, first and foremost, like from the being able to relate standpoint, I think that's critical, is that, whether you're talking dog training, training people for athletics, military, law enforcement, whatever, is that it can make all the sense in the world to who's teaching it. If it doesn't make sense to who's trying to learn it, then it doesn't matter how good you are at it, how much you know. If you can't effectively communicate and to your point, ultimately relate to the person that you're trying to teach, none of that fucking matters. And you see that a lot in a lot of different industries, where people are really, really good at what they do, but they're terrible at teaching other people, because they're either way over their head, or they're just looking at it from such a different perspective that it makes it really tough to retain any of that knowledge. And I think, having women teach women stuff like this is crucial, because there's things there that I'm just not going to see that frankly any man isn't going to see, and vice versa. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
The last chapter is Sharp Women Unite. What can you tell me about that?
I think we do better when we work together. I'm big on collaboration. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a firearm background. The first time I held a firearm was boot camp.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up. My dad wasn't a hunter. My brother wasn't. I mean, he does now a little bit. So until I married my husband, it was like, oh, first Christmas present, here's your own, first firearm, handgun. I'm like, yeah, of course. Well, I married a cop. Probably going to happen.
Yeah.
But so that's not my expertise. So I don't pretend to know stuff and to be able to answer questions. If somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm interested in getting a firearm, I'm like, great. A, where are you in the world right now? Because there's lots of things. But hey, I know this person's great. Oh, do you follow this person? Hey, connect with this person. Physical self-defense. Do I think you should learn physical self-defense? Yes. Self-defense is not martial arts. Okay, those are good skills to build and get you comfortable with close contact, to get you comfortable with physical contact in that realm. But it's never choreographed. And if you're waiting for them to do this, you can do this. It's not going to look that way. And then you might freeze in the moment going, wait, am I supposed to do this or am I supposed to do that? Yeah. Again, I'm trying to keep it generalized. But to me, the Unite is, I'm not trying to replace physical self-defense classes. I'm not trying to replace anyone in their expertise. Instead, I'm saying, let's have the conversation, because I will bring a different perspective. And if our ultimate goal is to help women live safer, live how they want to live, doing the things they want to do, well, then we should find a way. You and I should find a way to work together to make it better for them. Yeah. Because if that's the end goal, that's what we're both trying to do. Well, let's let the ego thing go, and just have the conversation, because that, and 9 times out of 10, that's what I get when I connect with people, other trainers or other instructors, but it's not always the case. Yeah. And so often people are like, oh, wait, you teach self-defense, but we're not going to hit things. I'm like, yeah, like it's so new that people don't. I spend most of my time even saying, well, this is what I mean by situational awareness. Yeah. And then it's like the light bulb goes off in their head, and they're like, oh, you need to be teaching this in high schools. You need to be teaching this here. Have you talked to flight attendants? Have you talked to restaurants? Have you talked to hotels? It's like, yep, if you have connections, give them my name. I'd be happy to talk with them, because these are, to your point, skills men and women can use. Yeah.
Well, I think, to elaborate or further that point, and that was actually the second thing that I was going to say that escaped my mind as we were going into the last chapter, but is that, I think keeping yourself in good shape, being strong, whether it's jiu-jitsu, self-defense, a combination of, striking and grappling, doing live sparring, making yourself that if push comes to shove and you have to physically defend yourself, like make yourself as big of a pain in that person's ass as possible. But the goal should be to never get to that point, and I think that's where a lot of times people kind of, can't see the forest for the trees in that way a little bit, where it's like they're just focused on like claw their eyes with your keys and, all these kind of almost Chuck Norris 80s cheesy self-defense tactics, which again, I'm not saying don't learn them. I think it's important and you should, but, look at it more like cold weather, is that the more layers you have to make yourself a hard target, the better, and if your spidey senses go up and you're situationally aware enough to notice some things that are a little off, that if you weren't paying attention, now get you into a point where now you do have to physically react because, you didn't say, wait a minute, this is fucked up. Let me, change my direction or, alter whatever my behavioral pattern is or what have you, then you'd never get in that place in the first place. So I think, kind of taking that multi-prong approach is really important. Lastly, it says how we can work with you in terms of kind of what you offer, what you prefer to do, and how people can get a hold of you, and kind of what you want to offer the public. What does that look like?
Right now, what I've found working or most effective is speaking engagements on a stage at women's events. There's all these women's empowerment events, whatever. And I'm like, this is a really important topic, but most of the time right away they go, are you going to talk about like violence and gore and gross stuff? And it's like, I am, but I'm going to do it in a fun way. Yeah. I promise you're going to
be lots of pictures.
Yeah. You're going to laugh and you're going to actually enjoy this conversation. But the training, and honestly, before the pandemic, doing corporate training focus, that was really tough because they kind of put it in the employee wellness bucket of like, this is the niceties. These are like the perks. Like we're going to help our female employees be safer when they're living in their personal lives. But the pandemic really kind of ripped that blindfold off and said, actually, if you're not aware of the impact that domestic violence can have on the workplace violence situation, if you're not aware of productivity, if you're not aware of, if you don't provide that OSHA duty of cause safe work environment, that can actually come back to haunt you because you were like, no, that doesn't happen here. That's not going to spill over into work. So now companies are a lot more open to having that conversation, and that the men get just as much out of it, because they're always like, well, do you just talk to women or will you talk to both men and women? I'm like, I'll talk to both because we need allies too. Yeah. And again, I don't think men are intentionally doing things to brush off our feelings. They just don't get it. They don't have that perspective. I mean, how often have we, do you hear guys say, I don't understand how women think. I don't get it. I don't get it. And then I'm like, but yet you're trying to tell us how we feel. So it's, no, let's just have this conversation and in a fun way that's not confrontational. And then self-defense instructors, I'm like, you're great. You do your thing. You've got your groove down. You've got your curriculum. This is an add-on. Yeah. This is, you don't have to become the situational awareness expert. I'll partner with you. I'm not, again, trying to replace you. I'm just saying, let's have the two conversations.
Yeah, it's the precursor to the hands-on stuff.
Right. Like give them the book, have them read it.
Yeah. Sharp Women, where can people purchase the book?
So you can get it on Amazon. That's probably the quickest way with if you have Prime. But the website, the diamondarrowgroup.com, is really the best place. That's where you're going to get some content. You're going to figure out, oh, I want to work with Kelly. I want to have her as a speaker. I want to bring her as a trainer. Or I'm interested in more information. We just launched our podcast this year, Thrive Unafraid. And that's where we're trying to have those real conversations and challenge the status quo or challenge some of the hypocrisy that's out there and say, we just want to have this conversation so you can overhear it. Yeah. Man and a woman's perspective, and be respectful and answer your questions, whatever you may have, because there's no stupid questions. And so often it's amazing to me when I'm out training or teaching individuals, and I'll catch myself assuming that they know. Like I'll hand them the water trainers for MACE, and they're like, wait, how do I use this? Like they don't even just stick the thumb in to get under the safety cap. It's not intuitive. They're like, oh, okay. Or, I had one young lady asked me, she's like, well, my dad doesn't want me to carry anything because he's worried it's going to be used against me. Okay, we got to have this conversation. Let's talk through it. Or should I call someone and have them on the phone with me while I'm walking from work to my car? It's not saying, no, that's a bad idea. It's like, okay, well, let's talk through this. So what is that person supposed to do if you get attacked? And, and talking through that, then they're going, oh, they kind of, those critical thinking skills. Yeah. So if you go to the website, you can get all of those type of things and ways to connect, ways to reach out if you have questions. I'm always open for those questions and stories.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it strikes a nerve being a father of two girls and, just seeing the things that go on, both in our society as well as, around the world. And it's really important stuff. And I appreciate everything that you're doing and have done and continue to do. The book is great. I recommend it to anybody that wants to learn more about this stuff, and also to contact her direct and line up having her come in or work with you guys, or even, do podcasts to further kind of what you're talking about, because it's super important. So anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I want to ask you, what was your number one takeaway? What was something that surprised you in the book? Because that's one thing. I love hearing from the guys with like.
For me, it's and it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's the difference in the way I look at threat assessment versus the way you would. Mm-hmm. And that disparity, I think, is really what highlights how important it is to have women be integrally involved in this type of training. And I think it's easy for guys to like, well, I'm the fucking protector and, it's my job. And so I'll teach you and whatever. But again, it's like there's trains of thought. The way that men look at things is just different, in some ways. And so to me, that's what stuck out the most, I guess, was that contrast of, even though I know that, like I have 2 daughters, I know that the way I look at things is almost fucking completely opposite of how they view it. But it's still, it's like that point never ceases to remind itself in conversations when you're, trying to train anybody else, is that, and I run into it again in dog training all the time. It's like, I know what I want the dog to do, but if he doesn't fucking understand it, then it doesn't matter. Like, then I need to change, whether it's the environment, my body language, how I'm setting things up to get him to make the decision that I want him to make so that I can mark and reward it, reinforce it, whatever. But is that even though I know that and I live it, like sometimes I still have to be reminded of it. And that's what kind of stuck out the most to me. But yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So for all you guys out there, again, thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking the time to come down and scour through the book. Lots of really good information. I encourage everybody listening to go check it out. Get the book and contact Kelly for any further follow-on training. Get your kids involved. If nothing else, use the book as a springboard into those conversations with your kids, because man, it's and I'm not trying to fearmonger, but it is fucking frightening, what's out there, especially in this digital age. And I do truly think that conversations and education, one-on-one education, parents and kids, teaching them how to kind of rationalize, recognize, realize, it's a lot of R's, what.
I have an acronym there of some sort.
Yeah. What's taking place and whether or not your spidey senses should be up and if you should be listening to them. So I do have a gift for you. It's a parting gift for coming on. So here's you gave me a coin from your husband's unit, which I thoroughly appreciate, and thank you for keeping us safe.
Very cool.
So there's a coin back.
And I did give you a coin, just for clarification. People are like,
yeah, it's already
only your husband's coin.
Yeah, both coins. I guess you sent yours a while back, so it's been up there for a little while now. But
this is awesome. Thank you.
So a mic drop coin with my business emblem on the back, and then the box is something that you can proudly wear up in
Minnesota. Nice.
Yeah. So
share this.
So I'm going to need to see a picture on Instagram of you rocking that in Minneapolis next time you go into town. So
next time I go out downtown, I'm going to wear my mic drop.
You damn
Choke
right.
yourself, man.
That's right.
Love it.
With some shit kickers and a Wrangler or a Stetson hat. Yeah.
Hey, my husband was an armorer, so he has a Stetson.
Do it.
Oh my gosh, that would be hilarious. I'm going to do it.
Awesome.
I'm going to do it.
To the listeners, I appreciate you guys tuning in show after show and supporting our sponsors. And it gives us the ability to have amazing guests like Kelly come on. So thank you for continuing to listen. If you didn't like it, choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.